probably good to grab one of those because that's the characters that we're going to look at today. So you can come up and grab one, and you know, you can keep them. You can work on them later. You know, we probably won't get through all of this, but you know, I'm going to do a little bit of talk about comics in general. Yeah, go ahead.
Shall I show you
Yeah, let's see
what we got here?
Absolutely.
So, I would just, the overhead pot works, but this actually looks better
It does,
than
yeah.
trying to use the overhead.
Okay.
So I would just use that, and then you've got a zoom in.
Okay.
See if you want to
Whoa,
go in
okay.
and a zoom out, so
Okay.
it's telling.
Yeah, leave it out. That's probably smart for
So
me.
if you need to make an adjustment, though, that's it there.
Okay, so that's widen until, okay. And
Yeah.
then everything else is like, okay, my hand, I see it well, so it's good, focusing.
Yep.
And if I just put
Yeah,
a
it
piece
seems
of,
to be in focus.
if I put just a piece of paper down, let's see what a pencil looks like on this. I draw.
I kind of bumped up the iris, so if you're drawing with
Oh, wait a second,
pencil.
it's busted.
Oh.
We'll go really
Oh,
dark.
there we go. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Can everybody see that? Is that visible enough for you? It is? Okay.
If you want a little darker.
A darker, a little more contrast?
Let's see,
Glad you know.
iris, we can close it up a little bit.
That's
See,
better.
that made it a little
That's-
darker.
That's better, yeah.
So
Okay.
I'll leave it there, but it's iris and closing will make it darker, and open will make it more contrasty,
Okay,
wider.
so it's in this blue area.
Yeah,
there,
yeah, and I'll
closing.
just leave it like that.
Okay,
So it's
that's
right
cool.
there.
All right, great.
And then, are you gonna want to walk and talk? Cause I don't have any wireless.
Yeah, no, this is fine. You
Okay,
know, it's
check.
like-
I'm gonna turn it up a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, are you turning it up a little bit?
Yep.
Okay. Check mic. Hello, hello. Okay. Yeah. Well.
That's better, I think. I think we can see it. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so hopefully you got your packets, and what we'll do, before we start actually doing a cartooning exercise, I'll talk a little bit about comics in general, because my name's Randy Emberlin, and I'm semi-retired from comics. I mean, I do occasionally, I'll ink an issue or work on something, but I did my 25 years, or about 20 years, and a lot of it was at Marvel, and then I helped start Dark Horse. Mike Richardson knew me, and I was already working at Marvel, and we're both from Portland, so that's how that worked out. But as an artist, I was an animator first. So I did animation for TV commercials for about 10 years with a partnership here in Portland. And that's when we had Oxbury animation stands. In the good old days before digital, right? So it was 2D animation mostly. And we did get into slit scans, that kind of dates me, like the Superman movies. But I learned my craft as an illustrator, as an animator. And then when I moved into comic books, it was easier for me to get a job as an inker. My friend Chris Warner, who's an editor at Dark Horse for like 18 years, he and I actually, he was an artist working in New York for Marvel, and I was able to submit my work through him. And so I moved out there for a little while until I was kind of established, and then I moved back to Portland and did most all of my work for comics at my home studio, which is nice. I mean, now everybody FTPs stuff, and they send it, like everything's inking blue lines, from the pencils. But in those days, it was FedEx for the most part, and so the actual artwork was transported all over the place. So I was just, some of you probably know a lot of this stuff, but I thought before we do this, since it said Drawing Comics with Randy Emberlin, I thought let's do a little educational section, since I do assemblies and I do a lot of workshops for schools and other things as well. And it's kind of fun to see how all of this stuff is fit together. Here's just this is a kind of I did this cartoon to kind of indicate the process. And the process, it's changed a little bit, but it hasn't changed a lot. It's like the writer conceives of the plot. I mean, at Marvel, I know that it works both ways now at Marvel because kind of everything's changed, but it used to be that the plot was done first. And the writer came up with this, and it was more of a, linear, a narrative, and it said, like this happens, and so when you got a plot in the mail, it was about 11 pages double-spaced typed. So for each page of type, we had to come up with, as we lay out a book, 2 pages of artwork. So because books were about 22 pages back then, and then they dropped back to 20, and now it varies, but that was kind of the formula. It was like 11 pages for the plot, and then 22 pages of art. So the art, the editor checks it. In these, the computer was still around, but it was like mostly for just information transfer. It's like he would check what the writer had done to make sure that it's not interfering with, some continuity, so that Dr. Doom isn't fighting, the Fantastic Four when he's supposed to be in the Spider-Man book or whatever. And so that the editor's there to always just check you. And then after the plot, is finally checked and it's okayed, it goes to the penciler. And the penciler, as we know, pretty much breaks it down. He goes through the 11-page and he'll circle sentences and decide, what's going to be a long shot, like an introductory shot or an establishing shot, how he wants to use close-ups, what the panel design is going to be. But usually you do it really small, like maybe take a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper. I know Mike Mignola does his stuff in he has sketchbooks that are ringed and they're like half size. So he'll lay his whole book out in something about like that. And he'll go through with markers. It's amazing. I looked at Mike. I was with him on the plane going to San Diego. I did Comic-Con for 22 years. I'm done now. If I can go to a con like this in my hometown, it's so huge. Anyway, he showed me his one that he was working on, and it was, to me, half of it was good enough to print. It was so good. It was like all the blacks and stuff were in there. And, if I were doing it, I'd be doing multiple panel, pages and trying to keep to around 6 or less. Because if you get if you get like 7 or 8 panels on a page, you think about the reduction, you're starting to lose a lot. So you go through and you break it down from the script, or not the script, but the plot, and do it this way for 22 pages. And then, you can kind of work with it. Because what you really want to do is think about, where are the exciting moments in the book, and if you can figure it out so that you have a page turn, like if you're working up to a climax on the page, and something exciting is going to happen, you want to have it so that you have anticipation at the bottom in the lower corner, turn the page, and boom, maybe go to like a half-page shot or a full-page spread or something that's, supposed to draw the reader, get them excited. So you're sort of always building towards that, and then you can start building again on the next page. So you have to think about that. Editors help do that, but artists really should be thinking in terms of how are the pages turned, and sometimes you need to know how many ads are going to go in the book before you can do that, and that's tricky too. So anyway, so the penciler does that. I don't want to spend forever on this. And then this is the Marvel way again, or it used to be. It goes back to the writer, and he scripts it. Now, granted, a lot of these writers nowadays write full script because they want total control and they want everything to be cool. But if you've really got a creative, an artist that has good ideas, like in the old days, Jack Kirby, he practically wrote most of those Fantastic Four stories. It's like, Lee would come up with ideas and Kirby would flesh them out and come up with all these other ideas, and in a lot of cases write in dialogue along the sides of the pages and so forth. You've probably heard that. But it's a real good thing, I think, to have a collaborative effort between the penciler and the writer, so that, because the writers aren't necessarily visual thinkers, some of them are, like Frank Miller's very much a creator, writer and an artist, and some of the artists, even Bendis can draw, like stick figure type stuff and even better than that, and communicate. So that's a good thing. But it's good to have that, I think, interplay between the penciler and the writer. And so he looks at the artwork in this case and writes the script. He already had an idea what it was going to be, but he uses, the penciler's ideas as well. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it's a full script, and then you get this thing and it tells you panel 1, this is what you're doing, panel 2, panel 3. So you don't always get that choice. But then the editor does the balloon placement, which Stanley used to say takes longer than the story to write. Maybe in his case that was the case. I don't know. It's like, but balloon placements, upper third of the panel, so it's out of the way. It's like, I think I may even have an example here of that. You guys know from just looking at comics, but here's like from a comic book. that's kind of, I don't know. Well, this is a page that's, I want a really complicated one. Something that, where you have to, because everything reads from left to right and down. So, some people have trouble reading comics, for heaven's sakes, it's kind of weird. But it's true. Like, here's one. This is from an old Spider-Man issue. And, I chose it just because it's so dense. But everything, it's like here you have thought balloons, right? So we have four things. We got a thought balloon. We've got the word balloon or speech balloon, which is just plain, like down here with a pointer. Thought balloon, of course, with the bubbles. So that's two different kinds of thinking. You got sound effect. That's another way of communicating in a comic book. And then you have the caption. So those are the four ways of communicating in comics. And you still have to know how to read it, left to right and down. So here, it's like you read here. This time I'll show him no mercy. Look out, he's going for his blaster. And then zat, the actual blaster happens. Then you drop down here and read the bottom, and it says the marble wall is going to fall on Randy. I guess that's me. I don't know. Anyway, so same thing. It gets complicated over here. It's like can't get away in time, but at least, I can shield him with my body. He's thinking that. Then you have crack. They had to, sandwich that in there, and then here it comes, and then he goes, the weight will bury us both. Well, it's like there's a lot going on in that panel. So placement of the word balloon is very important. And it's true. They try not to cover up the artwork. In fact, when I was an inker on some of the books, and they were doing, actually at the time, I think I was doing finishing work, so you get paid more because you're actually adding a lot more detail. But they would paste the word balloons over the artwork. So they paid us extra money because we would do the art and get it inked, and then it would get covered up. And so it's like we were actually inking or penciling things that weren't going to actually be seen. So they would actually pay us like $7 to $10 more per page, whatever. But at least we were getting compensated for that. But that was a crummy way to do it, really. So now what happens in comics is all of this verbiage, all of the word balloons and stuff, it's all done in the computer. Not all, because DC has people that hand letter books, and obviously, private creators, independents, they hand letter their stuff. But most of it is done in the computer with fonts, and then it's actually put together on, when they do the disc, they marry all that stuff together in a program, and so when it goes to the printer. So when the artwork comes back, sadly, there's no writing on it. I think you've seen that if you've bought, comic book pages from now. It's like they come back and it's just art with no words on the page because it's all done in the computer. So anyway, I'm just trying to give you an overview. I lived through all of this. I started in '85, so I saw comics all hand lettered on the board. It went in a certain progress. Then they tried to do overlays so that the letterer could be doing it while we were inking it. And then they would paste the balloons on. Then they went to the computer. So it was like 3 different generations of stuff that were going on. And that was all during the late 80s and the early 90s. And then the computer started coloring comics too. So, it's like we got into the Photoshop thing. It's all, fairly recent. This last 20 years, comics have changed so much. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so here's the lettering guy. It's like, yeah, well, he's been replaced for the most part, except for those who want to use a hand letter or do their own, which is great because lettering is an art. It's a great art form. And then the inker gets it after that. And so this way, all of the lettering would be over the pencils, and that way you're not wasting any time. You don't have to ink stuff that's going to be covered up. And then the colorist in the old days actually used to do codes. They used to use Dr. Martin's dyes, and they would write in numbers and letters showing, like yellow 1 or yellow 3, 25% screen. It's like they only had like 4 screens or something, 25, 50, 75. And so now that's out the window. It's all computer. You can paint with Photoshop. You can just do unbelievable things. So the colorist, he would have a computer instead of a brush. But I'm just trying to show you where it comes from. Then it all gets put on a disc, and it gets sent to the printer. And printers are, competing all over the place. But Ronald's is the big one up in Canada that most of the comic books are printed at. When I was growing up, it was in New York, I think. I can't remember the name of the company, but it was a big, one of those big presses. But Ronald's does most of this stuff. But there's competitive prices down here too. So anyway, we'll get to the cartooning here in a second. I was just going to say, if you're going to be an artist, if you're going to draw, this is something that, it's important because I did this for 20 years, and I had all sorts of neck problems and back problems, and now I have lower back problems, but I didn't have any luckily when I was doing this. And getting a board, a good drawing board that's flat, that actually has a spring-loaded, so you can adjust the tilt and stuff to it. Really, it's important. And the flatter that you work, the better it is for your back and your neck. You're gonna have less problems if you can get that board up, more flat. Even though it's tiring because you can't lean on it, but it actually is better for your neck and your back. And here's an old-fashioned fluorescent light, which I don't really think is a good idea because you have seizures or something from fluorescent, oscillations. So you can get incandescent, or you can even get those kind now that are kind of a combination of both, and they're good. You want a daylight. My studio, when we built our house in Beaverton, I built it with 2 skylights and a southern exposure, so I had lots of light and warmth, so I could be up there working. And the other thing that's get a good chair. Not a cheap one. Get something that actually supports your back, and you can move around. And here's this old table. They make really beautiful tabaret tables with all I always had with the plastic trays. But you want to separate your ink and your water and all of that stuff from the table. A lot of guys or kids work flat. They work on a flat table, and you got that ink and you got that water, and it's like, it's going to spill. It's just Murphy's Law. It's like, if it can happen, it's going to happen, and you'll end up with a huge mess. So you can't have those kind of accidents if you're working in comics. So you want to separate, all of your inks and waters and, brushes and pens on a separate table than the one you're actually working on. So just a few words to the wise, because I know I've had those problems. So in drawing, get to the drawing part now. I teach a lot now. I don't do as much, I teach camps in the summer, and I do after-school art programs, and I do private lessons with people that are trying to work on a comic, or, just want to hone their skills, or actually kids that are trying to get into, like a college for game design or something. I can help with those. But in drawing, when you're drawing the human figure, which is probably the most difficult thing, we won't do a full figure today, but you work with a stick figure. The best thing to do is work with I call it an action stick figure. And these are sketches actually from John Buscema, who is pretty famous, if you remember, at Marvel. And he doesn't really show the stick figure as much as I would. I would actually show the spine more and where the hip crosses, and like if I guess I could do this. This is kind of cool, and do both. Why not? It's like if you're doing a stick figure and you want to get proportions correct. I mean, a great book is the Andrew Loomis book, Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. But you can go ahead and do quick setup proportions and go, I need a character this tall. Doesn't matter what size. And then anybody can eyeball halfway through. You can go like this and go, there's half. So that is always the crotch of the character, male or female. And then you want to break it down and go half of this, and you can do the half, and you go half of this. So now you've pretty much got proportions, and all superheroes and comic book characters, I'm going to go half in between, are 8 heads high. So you can see what I did is I just went half, half, and then half again, and I've got 8. And so virtually, if I'm putting them in here, if I were stacking them up, I'd have, there's 4, so I'd have 8 heads. And that's your traditional superhero. I guess they said an 8 heads high character is about 6'4", 6'5", so, makes him a superhero. But it's easier to draw that way. I mean, you actually have something to work with it's a centered formula. I mean, it's, and they recommend it, even in, old commercial drawing books. So if you have a head, and then you've got, like this is the crotch, so you're gonna have the pelvis down here, so I usually just use a triangle. Put a spine down here, and then about between the next 2 heads, you can put the shoulders in, and on guys, the shoulders are wider than the pelvis. On women, it's about the same, probably because they have to make babies and stuff, so they have a larger area down in here. So it's smaller for guys. You can get the bigger shoulders here. So this is your stick figure. You're kind of, and if I put circles on here, it's kind of like where it's going to go. And then your knees come down to this, if these are fourths, here's 1/4, 2, 3, 4/4. So down here, you're going to bring these legs down, and your knees are going to hit on this fourth, the first fourth. And then the thighs, or not the thighs, but the calves come down to here, and your feet about there. So it looks, it's, actually I didn't get this probably exact in my dividing, but it should be about like that. That's about right. Okay, and then the arms, you can just draw a straight line. Your fingertips should come down, and you can do it to yourself, halfway between your knee and your hip. So, when you got your hand down like that. So you can even draw a straight line down here, and just go, where's halfway between? And then figure out that's where the fingertips are going to be on this character. And then where the elbow is exactly halfway between the wrist and the shoulder. So make sure that's about the same distance. You can kind of eyeball it or check yourself on it. So once you have a character like that, you've got a stick figure, and I call it an action stick figure, and then you can go ahead and put in the egg shape for the torso. And the neck is always in front because we have shoulders for our back. But once you start doing that, you can do the rib cage like that. And since you've got your pelvis here, which is really two bones, you can actually use those, put a couple of circles at some of these intersections. The shoulders are going to be more of an oval shape. And everything goes from greater to lesser concentration. Without putting a lot of muscles in this, you can kind of go, here's the hips, here's the knees, here's the ankles. Go down like this. And then just know that they have to taper down. Same thing here. And then you can connect here. And all of a sudden, with very little effort, you've got, you have a figure, and if you can work with a figure like that, pretty simple, and start posing it, if you're into drawing, have a sketchbook and do lots of these kind of drawings. Do lots of these kinds of, action pose drawings. Actually, people sitting is even harder to draw than people running or jumping or hitting. Repose is difficult. So like, somebody sitting in a chair or on a chase lounge, that's going to be tough, So, drawing just your friends or your neighbors or your brothers or sisters or, whatever, that's a good thing to do. And keep it simple so that you're following these proportions and, you're working with the figure doing different things. And, there's a couple, here's another one from, I think this was from like Drawing Comics the Marvel Way, which is still a good book. It's like, I think you can get it paperback. It's like $10 or something like that. So, it's more of his drawings, but these have, a spine, and they're basically a stick figure. You could go, in fact, I give students this assignment. I say, go put this structured, stick figure inside these drawings. Take a red pencil, and I'll give them a piece of paper, and, go ahead and find where those are. So, and then you can flesh them out. So it's good to do that kind of stuff. So this is, everything has usually a line of action. And at Marvel, it's true, they tend to want things more dynamic. So even though, you've got this guy and he's running here, he's running pretty upright, and it's kind of boring. So at Marvel, they would say, tilt the figure, get this line of action leaning forward, which creates more dynamics and more speed, and get his arms more extended, get a bigger stride going with his leg, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that kind of action. It can be more subtle than that. It can be like this, where you have like a character standing, pretty boring. This is Jack Kirby for sure. It's like legs 10 feet apart, spread out like this, hand on hip, pelvis forward, head down, and an arm extended, and all of a sudden it's dramatic, as opposed to this guy. Or if you look at these, you've got this guy's pretty boring over here, and so is this guy. So, it's the same thing. Kick the hips forward, tilt the head down, arms akimbo here and legs spread out, and you can see there's kind of a nice little S curve that's going on. It just adds dynamics to the drawing. So those are just some things to think about when you're doing, like human figures. And I know you probably want to do some fun stuff. Let me do one last thing. Let me check my time, see how much time we got so we can do a lot of this. 1:20. Okay, we're almost half gone. All right, I'll do this last thing here just because I think it's kind of fun to see the process. Here we go. In fact, I'll do two things. This is actually a good deal. Where is it? It's how to tell a story like in a single page. Is that, here it is, right here. Yeah, this is one I worked on actually. It's with Eric Larson on a Spider-Man issue a while back. But it shows you what you can do on a single page. And this is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 panels. And literally, yeah, it's from Amazing Spider-Man 349. I think I still own this page. So it's, you can tell a whole story in this amount of space. He has an establishing shot here. And can you see that okay, or is it not big enough? Blow it up a little bit. See if I can get it to tell a zoom in. I'll just do it panel by panel then. So let's get it over here so we can get it in. That's barely in. Okay, so you have this wide shot, and you know, here's it's set up. You've got the character running away. He's got a purse. She's screaming, giving it back. And then here it says checks cashed. All of that information in one panel says a robbery has just been committed. So he didn't take anything but one panel to do that. The guy runs around the corner, and who's there but Spider-Man? So here's your money shot. If you're doing comics, you have this money shot on the page of Spider-Man. You know, it's like a big dynamic shot upside down or whatever. And the guy runs around the corner and he's like, you know, and it's like in Spider-Man's, you know, because he goes, I'm keeping this purse, and then it continues the dialogue, want to bet? So, you know, here's your big money shot. Then here's the confrontation. You have the, you know, and the climax and the resolution. It's all in these last panels. So he jumps down, makes a joke, as Spider-Man always does. You know, he goes, I saw the crocodile Dundee. It's a knife, you know. And so he breaks the knife with his finger. So you go from a medium shot to a close-up here, and then kind of another medium shot or a medium close-up. And he's like, please, I got a sick mom. Let me go. And he goes, I won't do it again. And he goes, you're right, you won't. So last panel, you get the police, the guy upside down, and Spider-Man going away. And so this is brilliant in the sense that it all was told in, 6 panels? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 panels, 1 page, you can tell a story. But you have to know how to do it. And notice he mixes it up. He's got the long, wide shot. He's got one large shot, you know, to give you some excitement. And then here's an open panel here. And then 3 little narrow panels, you know, from a close-up to, you know, kind of pulling back. And then you get a long shot in the end. And so, you know, you could tell a story on 1 page. So it's tricky, but, you know, it's useful. And, you know, I'll do this real quick, too. Here's kind of a breakdown. And this is kind of the way you'd want to start if you're using stick figures. You can break down your panel, get your action and stuff, you know, where you want it. Position your figures. Think about, you know, the camera, where it's going to be. Like here at the bottom, you know, you got kind of a close-up of the feet getting tangled up, and then the character. You really can't see exactly what they're going for here. But then if you put this over the top, you know, you can see things are starting to flesh out. So it goes from that to this, and it's the Silver Surfer and Spider-Man. So we're still looking at mannequin figures. So they're kind of a step beyond the stick figure. You've got some of the masses in, and here here's a close-up of Spider-Man, and then his feet are tangled down at the bottom. And he's getting, what's his name? The Silver Surfer's getting tangled up, and he goes off the edge of the building. So now we can actually see, here's the perspective and stuff on the building. All right, so let's drop this over here, and then it's time to flesh it out even more, and you end up with, you know, a really clear shot with shadows and everything. You've got Spider-Man and the Silver Surfer, and he's going for his board, and, you know, or he blasts Spider-Man. And Spider-Man he's down here, and he uses his webbing. You can see the webbing actually around his feet now. And then he throws him over the edge of the building. So, but that's really a good example of, you know, how penciling works. It really works that way. It goes from nothing to, like, you know, a little bit more complex, and then you can get into refining it. And too many people go right to the details. You know, they don't want to waste their time, you know, drawing the stick figures and laying it out properly. And unfortunately, you end up erasing and making mistakes. And in comics, time is everything. And you can't afford to make those kind of mistakes. So you really have to lay things out clearly in a very primitive form and make sure it's all working before you commit to drawing it. Because it's, you know, time is money, let's face it. And comics generally took, I'd say, you know, pencilers should do a page a day That's what they were kind of expected to do. And good pencilers like Jack Kirby could do like 2 or 3 pages a day. And I tried to do, inking wise or penciling, I try and do a page and a half, which is a lot. I mean, it's like you end up working like 12 to 14 hours. Your days are pretty long days when you're doing it because these periodicals come out so frequently. So, okay, all right, enough of that about comics. That's my experience. And let's do some drawing. Let's take a, let's see. I know I got some paper here. I thought I had some. In fact, is this my paper? Yeah, there we go. So, let's take this tiger cub first. The guy that, if you've got him, this character. And what's good about this is, cartoon characters are fun. I mean, I did animation for 10 years before I got into comics, so I appreciate, all the different styles of animation. They're fun to do, and I learned about timing and stuff. But its construction of characters are based on geometric shapes, and even, in the comic books. I mean, humans and stuff are based on it. They're a little bit more asymmetrical, but, if you're doing something you have to repeat many times, like in animation, you want to make sure you have a formula. So a lot of these characters have formulas. So if we're going to do this tiger guy, I'll put it down here kind of so you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'll work up above. He's got kind of a triangular head, but it's kind of rounded. So what I'll do is, let's see if I can, yeah, that's about right. I'm going to put the head about here. So you can use your whole piece of paper for it if you want, however you want to do it. And we want to just kind of get this, it's kind of a diamond shape. I mean, it can even be kind of rounded on the bottom. And then, I'll take this actually off. His body is like a bean shape, or an oval, big oval shape. And you can just kind of, be loose. You don't have to draw this stuff perfect. This is what we called, doing breakdowns, basically. And then, I could put him over here, I guess. I'll move my guy. There we go. Okay. So then, you can go ahead and figure out, where his eyes, and actually we can let's do his feet, just to get, if you want, you can always do this. You can start by putting a couple of lines at the top and the bottom and go, that's how big he's got to be. I know he does. Because on model sheets, when we do it in animation, there's lines that go through it that give you that kind of a breakdown so you can keep your characters consistent, actually horizontal lines. But we'll just go like this. Put a center line, and then since these are going to kind of connect, you can just angle his feet in from the side of his body. He's leaning a little bit, so that's why it kind of curves off. And then you can just give him a couple of ovals for feet for now. Okay, and it looks like his ears are kind of Mickey Mouse-like. They're not as big, but they're just, you can do kind of a circle that sticks onto his head here. So get a couple of those. So we're into circles and ovals. We've got a couple of ovals. We've got a bean shape. And now this is a cool formula. I usually teach this bear. It's like Barney Bear from like the old Warner Brothers cartoons. But this guy's similar, and I didn't want to repeat what I did last time. So you can divide it like this. Just divide his head, and it's a great formula. I can get this thing turned over here. It's a great formula for a lot of different characters, bears and dogs and beavers and whatever else. And you can put the eyes go right on the top shelf here, right where the intersection is, and they can touch. A lot of times eyes, like on manga characters or even, like Pokemon characters, the eyes are like almost on the side of their head. There's like 3 eyes in between. Here, the eyes are right together. Now, on my head, it's like humans are like 1 eye in between, so it's like 3 eyes wide. Sometimes they'll say 5 eyes wide, but really it's the eye that's the big deal. It's what's in between. This one, you don't have to worry. Just put the eyes together, give him a character like that, and then he's got his nose or muzzle, which is kind of it's kind of a cough drop shape. And it's about as wide as his eyes are. And you can just have that come down. And then he's got another geometric shape, this triangle, kind of a rounded triangle for his nose. And you can make it a pretty good sized nose because he is a cartoon character here. So now we've got, a pretty good layout already for his head without even doing his mouth. Let's get his arms. he's got one arm up and one arm kind of down a little lower. One is, like more behind his head. This one actually we could probably have come out. And notice arms don't grow out of the sides of characters. Kids have a tendency to like have the arms come out here. They start at the neck or the shoulders, So it's like always start your arms there. And you've got, this one goes up to about where his head is. So you can drop an oval up there to start with if you want, and then draw your arm back from there. So you got this, okay? And then stick a thumb on, just a little bulbous thumb. And you've got one arm positioned pretty well. The other one can come out from the side here. You might want to stick his hand on first. Sometimes it's fun to figure out where it's going to be and then bring the arm out to it. And he's got another thumb that sticks out here. So you've got, I wonder if I can move him over a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we've done figure one pretty much. So I guess I can go like this. That's right. Very, very astute of you. And the tail is actually, I always tell people, don't try and make the tail, perfect the first time. Just figure out what you want it to do. If it's, and just use one line. In this case, it's just a kind of a hook. You could have a complex tail that comes down and goes around. Well, it's easier to draw it with one line and then go back and draw the parallel line later. But make sure you get your curve properly done before you do that. Okay, let's see if I can drop this. We'll drop it over to the next guy. He's kind of, all right, you can see him as well. And we don't have to have everything about him. Okay, so you can start dropping in some details. We've got most of the stuff going on that we need here. So you can like go to the hair, and you can either use your eraser and like take out the point on top of his head. And a lot of times cartoon hair and stuff is open. You don't even have to finish the lines. And he's got a couple of stripes on his ears. And then on the inside of the ears, he's got a couple of upside down C shapes or kind of U shapes. So you've got that. They actually go ahead and shade those in, but you didn't have to do that at this point. One thing about characters, and I'll do this real quick because I think it's important, expressions on characters, there are so many expressions you can do with even a simple set of eyes like this, where you don't even have a lot of sophisticated eyelashes and eyelids and all that kind of stuff. But if you, for instance, if I do this, if I put a couple of lines like that and put his mouth like that, then what kind of a expression is that? It's a surprised expression, right? Pretty simple, okay? So even without the mouth, we can do, obviously, we can do this, right? Just a couple of lines going down, and he's angry. I haven't done anything to the eyes other than change the eyebrows, And so, there's just so much, and they call these compound expressions when you start getting into doing a lot of different stuff. So let's have one go up, and then one go down. So now what? Now what's the expression? He could be what? He could be, or he could be, confused or irritated, or, who knows? Maybe he's, or if you did this, then you can start screwing around with this. You can go like this. So you put a smile with that, and now what is he? He's an evil genius, yeah. He's an evil genius. He's up to something, all I did was mix a smile with, with something else that they don't go together, but they do. That's what's so cool about it. It's like, or, you could give him a mouth like this, and maybe we could even, let's change these so that they go like this. And all I've done, it's the same eyes. Now what is he? He could be sad. He could be upset. Worried? Yeah, he could be worried. You got a lot of emotions here that you could work with, and then, and then it gets weird. It's like we could go back to this again. And now his pants fell down or something, he's embarrassed, right? That's all it takes. So, it's almost limitless. You start getting into this kind of stuff, and, if you change, there's a lot of different mouth positions, but that I'm not even going to touch on here, but, you could even add eyelids, and then Now what is he? He's getting sleepy, right? You know, it's like, so just by adding, you know, some eyelids or something to him, then you're into a whole nother thing, because eyelids can be like eyebrows. I mean, like on Garfield, you know, that's what he uses for his eyebrows. So, all right. Well, anyway, we'll just leave it at, we'll just make him what they've got here. He's kind of, looks like he's worried, or he's quizzical. So I'll just kind of have the eyebrows go like this. But you can experiment with, you know, on your own and actually get a lot of really cool combinations. So we'll put his mouth kind of down like this and give him a few little triangle of whiskers, and you can give him a couple of whiskers on each side. And, you know, we don't really need these construction lines that much anymore. We've got all that stuff taken care of. So now it's just a matter of kind of going in and fleshing him out. You know, it's like he's got tiger stripes here, and they're triangles, so that's easy, right? And you can just kind of position those so they're even. Give him 3 on each side. And these are going to be, you know, obviously shaded in at some point. Usually late. Blacks and stuff, you leave it till later. You do it at the end because it's, you know, you don't have to think about it. So then, you know, he's got this little white chest thing. So we can it looks like a bib, kind of. Get rid of that extra line. That's why I say it's okay to work loose, you know, and then you can go back and do what they call a cleanup drawing. And that's where you just, you know, erase things and go over things. And then he's got his hands, which are just, you know, at this point, they're just these, you know, ovals. But now you could turn them into, you know, you can go like this and go, hey, I want to have some fingers on there. You know, it's like we don't even have, and then give him a palm and erase where some of that stuff goes. And building hands, you know, like most cartoon characters have 3 fingers and a thumb, but not all of them. You know, it's like some of them don't. So you just have to kind of go with whatever the character is. So, you know, you could go with him, you know, like this, and then he's got some more tiger stripes here on his hand. You know, you can make sure he's got a palm. Make sure that this, I kind of like my thumb better than theirs. And it doesn't have to always go across. It can just kind of be, you suggest it, you know, where the palm is. They've just got him with his finger, and you can't see his other hands, or his other fingers, but I like seeing the fingers. So over here, yeah, like same thing. You could even use this as the palm if you want, and then just build your fingers on top of that. Erase this stuff. So, you know, his hands almost look human. So then, you know, you can add some fluffy stuff to his coat here and get rid of the line, and, you know, start taking out some construction lines that we don't need, like where his arms attached to his body. And I think we've got most of him. It looks to me like they have him leaning a little more than I do, so maybe this leg is a little bigger. Have him leaning off to this side. You can take off the circle down at the bottom, part of the bean, and go back. Now you can kind of choose how you want to do this. You could go inside the tail or outside. You have to kind of figure out where it is on his body. But, you know, I can just kind of bring it back around like this. And I like putting a black tip on the tail myself. And then you can do as many of these as you want. You know, it's like, as long as, and when you do these, don't try and curve them with the shape of the tail. Think of it as like a hose or a coil, and how would, you know, if you were drawing a circle around it, how would you, you know, get that shape? You always want to go with the contour of whatever the shape is. So, you know, give them a couple of, you know, these down here, which are going to be shaded in. And then when you get to the feet, they're real simple. You know, it's like divide it into thirds and make them into like these pads on a critter. So you don't need to have it where it connects. In fact, these could be bigger feet, apparently, from what I have. Could go clear out to here, and then just kind of divide those into thirds, like that. And maybe erase where his ears are attached to his head. That's why it's good to have, like a good, I have a eraser, I didn't bring it with me, but like one of my favorite erasers is called, it's called Tough Stuff, and it's black, and you fill it with, really thin eraser, refills. And, I just have the eraser in my ear because these pencils, they just burn up. And that way you can just click it and you can erase details. They make bigger ones, but the really thin ones, the Tough Stuff ones, are great for doing detail erasing. And if you're doing comics, man, you're doing detail work all the time, so it's good to have that. All right, so yeah, you might darken the inside of his ears or whatever, and pretty much it's ta-da, it's like you've got, I don't know, did we forget anything? I don't think so. So, you've got a character and any expression that you want to do. So he's kind of an animated character, it'd be easy to repeat if you were going to draw like 1,000 of these in a cartoon. That's a pretty good formula. And there's a lot of formulas that are very similar to that. So, all right. So how do we do on that one? You guys do okay? Right. I left some other ones here. You can try some of these on your own. So a little different, kind of a take on those. Okay. So let's see how much time I got here. Clear. Okay, we got. What do you guys want to do? You tell me. Do you want to do Spider-Man's head, because that won't take very long, and then start on something else? Okay, let's do Spider-Man. Yeah, I know, let's do Wolverine. Wolverine's good too, but let's do Spider-Man's head because we're running a little short, but we might get into another one too. So Spider-Man's head is, what I didn't put on here is that actually a lot of times when you're doing a profile, it does fit into a box, and it's kind of the Marvel way, teaches you that, but it's not a real box, it's more of a rectangle, so it's a little narrower than it is tall. And it's like you can either do that. I mean, it's kind of it's a kind of a weird way of doing it, but I think you can probably just do it the other way. It's like use a circle. It's an easy way to do it. So this is what I do. Okay, so I would just take this. I'll put it. I guess I can put it over here. And I would start. You can start with a circle because we're going to build his skull. And, it's like we want to be able to have a center line here and here. That's going to tell us where the eye placement is. And it's also going to tell you where your ear and your jaw are. Because on the side, your ear would actually be right here at this intersection. And, if you were drawing this as a person, his eyes would be just on or below this line, like if this were the regular eye. And the jaw line would it comes right down from your ear. And it goes out like this, and there's a little bit of an angle here because the nose comes out from there, and then you have a little bit of a forehead. So with Spider-Man, the cool thing is you don't have to draw any of those features. You're just drawing him behind the mask. So the main thing is to know where that nose and where that eye goes, and that's why this line helps you. So you have this circle, and it could even be. You could even make it more of an oblate spheroid, kind of like a squish, like an oval or something. So what I would do is just kind of know where those are, and then you can build. It should have this angle that comes down to this, and then your neck is not a lamppost. Everybody, like a lot of people when they're drawing, it's like they want to. Can you see me up here? They'll do this. They'll like put a head on top of a body like that, and it's like, it's just not. It's not a lamppost. It's like our head is forward. And our neck is forward. That's why I have collars on my shirts and stuff, V-necks and stuff. Your shoulders are behind you. So you want to make sure that the neck actually comes out at an angle, and it can be pretty thick, about like that. And then you can just show where the chest is going to come down. So that's what I would do. It's like get that shape first. So you've divided that. You've got the neck coming about halfway between this beginning of the jaw and the end. And this is kind of in the middle of the pie, if you were drawing out from this little piece of quarter. And once you've got that, then you know where you can place the eye, or the giant Spider-Man eye, which is kind of, it's kind of weird that he has this huge eye, but his eyes are really in here, but the eyes go clear back to here. But it's a lens, so we don't worry about that. So you can just start with sometimes some people draw Spider-Man, they've got this little, it's kind of a fang or something on the inside. So that's kind of a cool thing to draw. I mean, you can do, let's see if I can get that, how much I can get on here, like that. You can start with that where the eye is right here, and just pretend like his eye's a little further back. And it's kind of a teardrop shape, and it's huge. It's like, it's kind of this, if you look at it, it's kind of this big teardrop shape. And one thing that was pointed out to me when I was doing Spider-Man, because there's a lot of things that people do wrong. The way it was originally designed, by Steve Ditko, there was some sense to it. Actually, the way the webbing went and everything, there was the specific way, but other people just ignore it and they just do whatever they want. But I learned that the lens inside of the eye does not imitate the outside. And that's what everybody does. It's like the first person, even John Romita did it wrong. It's like, when he was like, did these little tiny eyes like this, and then the eye, it's like repeated itself. And really, that's not what it does. It's more of an oval or an egg shape. It's a plastic lens. So it doesn't imitate the outside. It's like that. And if you look at the guys who know what they're doing on Spider-Man, and I mean, he did a great job on Spider-Man. He changed everything, but the way it was originally designed. Anyway, so like that. I usually leave a couple of, reflection places on the black, so you can just kind of go around. And now that you've got that egg shape in the middle and you've got this on the outside, we can probably get rid of some of these extra lines. Okay, so now you've got the bulk of the work is done. The only tricky part now is the webbing. And this is the trick on the webbing, at least, what I learned. And it actually does change its shape as, as it goes around the character's head and down his arms. And I don't think we'll get to see all of that, but it starts in the center. So it's like an explosion that comes out from the center between his eyes, and it goes all the way down his body. So if you do that, you can kind of figure out, I think I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, looks like a dozen lines. So just kind of, start them here in the center and then space them, if you can, kind of equally as it goes around. And you can go back up here and work from the top. Just, you can pretend you can draw through the black, actually. It's not going to hurt anything because it won't be there. So maybe about like that. And then a lot of times they'll shade the back of the head a little bit darker because, lighting is very important. Put a shadow underneath his neck. Give him an Adam's apple because guys have Adam's apples, right? So you can do that. All right. And then when you do the webbing, it's done like Charlotte's Web. So it's like, if everything starts in the center, I'll just kind of do a quick, here it's coming. You want it to go out like this. So you'd actually start with a little star shape like that, and the webbing goes out, and it continues to hold that shape as it wraps around his body. So notice it's sort of bowing in a way, and they should connect to each other. It's like, these webs should. So you can start that here. You can go, okay, I'm in the center here. I'm going to do these. So it's good to do like a row at a time. And then you can kind of just put a little curve in it as you go. Maybe go back up here and work on a few. The webbing is what drove most of those artists insane because, and that's why probably Romita, he would do it with like about 3 of those loops. He'd just like, okay, I'm done. It's like, put a couple on there, it's it. But Ditko actually took the time, and so did a lot of people, to put a ton of webbing on here. So you just want to make sure that they connect as you're going around. And notice which direction they're going. Keep it consistent, like that. Okay, and then you can shade a little bit back here, but for the most part, there's a pretty good profile of Spider-Man. And that's, the webbing. The only thing I didn't show you about the webbing is like, if the guy's elbow changes direction, like here's his arm, like this, and the webbing is coming around the corner, like this, like this is his hand or whatever, then if this is the curvature of his arm, the webbing is going to curve with that curvature. It's always going to follow the curve of if your arm is coming forward or it's going backward, it's going to change. So it would go like this, and then as it came around here, it's going to continue up. It just changes it. Sometimes it'll flip and it'll actually go back the other way. So it depends on how the leg or the arm is. But anyway, so that's Spidey. Let's see, we got time? We can start something else? Well, I got a couple of minutes. All right, let's just, for fun, because Sonic's a little too hard. I think he's a little too much. Let's do Wolverine. Sonic's good, but he's got foreshortening. That might be a little too advanced. So, where is this? See if I can get it on here. Maybe I should zoom back out. I'll go out. There, that's better. All right, so it's the same thing. You know, you're doing a human head, so you can go ahead and you can have kind of this oval shape to start with. It's a circle, but it's, you know, kind of a little bit more of an oval than a circle. And then you can go ahead and divide. Actually, what you need to do is draw the jaw on first. And that's going to just come down and kind of come to a point like that. So it's pretty simple. And then you want to divide this in half and then divide this in half the other way. So it's not half of the circle, really, but it's half of the distance between the top of his head and his jaw to get it correct. And that's pretty typical. And, you know, the sides of the circle can be trimmed off because nobody has a round head on the sides. Okay? And then his eyes, you know, you make sure that you've got one eye's width in the middle. So I'll just kind of put this, you know, phony eye in here. And then you can kind of do these, I don't know what you want to call these things. It's kind of like a half circle or another teardrop shape, you know, for the eyes. And they can kind of come in and touch here. Then you've got your spacing pretty good on your eyes. And from the corner of the eyes, you can get the side of his mask. So it's like if you kind of draw a line lightly down the side here, you're going to end up with where his mask is. Now, he's kind of like Batman. You know, he's got that M shape. So because the nose is like, you know, it's got this covering over it. On Batman's, it's like a pair of triangles. And on Wolverine's, it's not. But yet it is. I mean, it's got these two dark triangles, but it's got kind of a flattened out place. So it's not quite like Batman, but, you know, it's similar. So on this, where the nose is, it's a little above where your circle comes around. I mean, I can't call that halfway between the two because it isn't. And it's not thirds. It's one of those proportions that, you know, you have to get used to drawing because you can't break it up into equal parts. So, you know, about there. And we're probably out of time. But anyway, so you get this here, and then what you can do is you can on the sides, you know, you can put the two triangles which come right off of his eye, like that. This is the old costume anyway. And if I erase this center line, you can kind of see where this is going. And really, I mean, you know, his ears or his, you know, the parts of his mask start right down here where the intersection is, just a little bit over, and you're going to have to try and match that shape, you know, after, and that's a shape that's, yeah, it's not that easy to do. I mean, you can get pretty big ones, you know, but it comes down here. And then if I just, you know, I'll just do half right here, take out this, and take out this circle. You can kind of see where we're going with it. Because all of this is going to be pretty much black. You know, although what they did here is they left this for color highlighting, you know, and it's like they make it blue. So all of this, you'd put like an X here, and that means when you come back later in comics, it means black it in, put the X in, and you got that. And these will all be, you know, black on the sides, and the mouth just goes, generally it's like, I think if you do thirds, I think you can almost figure out where it is. It's like thirds. So you could put the mouth like here if you did thirds, you know, you get 1, 2, 3 between where the nose is. And it can be just a simple, you know, you can give him a lower lip if you want, and a couple of these. And of course, he's got, you know, like, you know, days growth of beard. I don't know, who knows how long it takes. He can probably grow that like overnight or something, you know, whatever. So anyway, so this, I'll just do this side because I have room on here. But yeah, once you have this darkened in, and then you can do some feathering if you want to, you know, to sort of show that. And then he always is angry, so we have to have like irritated lines here, and usually some feathered lines that come down from there. But, you know, don't show his eyes. You know, it's like, don't do that. It's like Batman. It's like you got to leave him, you know, you can darken around him, but you can't go into him. And, you know, it's like, that's about, you know, it's like you could give him a pretty good sized neck too, because he's buff. So anyway, I've probably gone over time, but you get the idea. Almost everything that you do, there's geometric shapes and separations. So really having a formula to go by is very helpful. So anyway, hopefully I helped you with something and you learned something about comics, and you know, you can do some of this stuff on your own. And there's some great books. I mean, you know, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way is one of them, and Loomis's books are great if you're really into drawing too. So, all right. And you can keep all, you know, your stuff, your packets, and work on those characters. And it turned out that this thing worked. That's good. Hey, there you are. Yeah. Yeah, it worked out. She showed me how to do the zoom in and zoom out factor on this, and it really helped.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to go back to my table now and finish my...